I was just a normal 15-year-old girl, living my life in Colorado, not thinking much about death. That was until the afternoon of April 17th, when everything changed. I was hiking with my best friend Maddie on a trail I had walked countless times before. It was supposed to be a peaceful day, but something went horribly wrong. My chest started tightening, my breathing became shallow, and within moments, I found myself collapsing onto the dirt path. I tried to tell Maddie, but before I could say another word, everything went dark. I thought I was just fainting, but I was wrong. In that moment, I was no longer in my body. It was as if I was floating above it, watching myself from a distance, helpless, as Maddie tried desperately to revive me. The pain disappeared, and I felt weightless, as though I was being lifted by something much bigger than myself. Then something incredible happened. I began to move through a tunnel, bathed in soft, glowing light, not of this world. It wasn't a bright, blinding light like the sun. It was warmer, kinder, like the gentle glow you see when light passes through stained glass windows. As I moved further, I saw him. Jesus. I never considered myself religious before that moment. I wasn't one to attend church regularly, only on holidays. But when I saw him, I knew. Not because he fit the pictures in Sunday school books, but because his presence was undeniable. He radiated love, knowledge, and understanding. And when he spoke my name, it broke me in the best way. I felt tears that weren't of sorrow, but of release, of knowing that all the pain I had carried throughout my life was suddenly gone. That moment, that peaceful, divine encounter, wasn't just about me. It was about what he needed to show me, what he needed me to share. He showed me the future, 3 catastrophic events that would occur before 2030. These weren't just predictions of natural disasters, but of a humanity tested like never before. I saw the world changing in unimaginable ways, and I was tasked with telling others. These events weren't meant to instill fear, but to prepare our hearts for what was coming. In those moments, I understood that there was more to life than what we see. The future was bigger than me, bigger than any of us. And somehow, I had to be the one to carry the message. But what was this revelation? What was he trying to tell me? I couldn't yet grasp all of it, but I knew one thing for sure. The world was about to face challenges far beyond our understanding, and the only way we could survive them was together. Love, compassion, and faith would be our guiding lights. But there was so much more to this story, and I had to share it. The question was, how? My name is Brooke Elaine Westfield. I was 15 years old and lived a completely ordinary life, or so I thought. Death was something that happened to others, not to me. I lived in Colorado, where the mountains and the clear skies were just the backdrop to my everyday routine. I loved volleyball, and like most teenagers, I spent far too much time on my phone. Life was simple, with my parents being divorced but still maintaining a decent relationship for the sake of my little brother Ethan and me. I lived with my mom during the week, and on weekends, I stayed with my dad. The biggest worries in my life were finals coming up at school, making the varsity volleyball team, and wondering if Jake from my biology class liked me back. Nothing too serious, just the usual stress of being a high school sophomore. That Saturday, things were supposed to be normal. My best friend Maddie and I had planned a hike in the mountains. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend getaway, nothing out of the ordinary. The weather was perfect, and we set out on Eagle Ridge Trail, laughing and chatting as we walked. I had hiked this trail before, and the thought that something could go wrong never crossed my mind. I had been on countless hikes, and this one felt like just another afternoon spent enjoying nature. But then, something changed. About 2 miles up the trail, I felt a tightness in my chest. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just a little shortness of breath from the climb. I had mild asthma, and I had used my inhaler before the hike, so I wasn't too worried. But this time, it was different. The sensation wasn't like the usual tightness I sometimes felt. It was as though someone had placed a heavy weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It felt like there was no air reaching my lungs, and I couldn't get a good breath in. I told Maddie that I needed to stop for a moment, just to catch my breath. She stopped walking beside me, and I tried to steady myself, thinking it would pass. But it didn't. The pressure in my chest grew, and I started feeling lightheaded. My vision began to blur, and my knees felt weak. I tried to take deeper breaths, but nothing seemed to work. My heart raced, and the feeling of panic started to rise in me. Maddie noticed my struggle and quickly told me to sit down. She knelt beside me, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't respond properly. The world around me began to fade, and everything turned dark. I couldn't remember if I'd passed out or if I'd simply fallen asleep. But the next thing I knew, everything was completely still. The pressure in my chest was gone, and there was no more pain. It was as though my body no longer existed, and I was somewhere else entirely. I remember the odd sensation of floating. It was as though I was suspended in air, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. I felt no fear, no panic, only peace. Looking down, I saw Maddie kneeling next to my body, shaking me and screaming into her phone. She seemed so far away, like I was watching everything from a distance. I couldn't hear her voice, but I could feel her desperation. I wanted to call out to her, to let her know that I was okay. But the words wouldn't come. I tried to reach out, but I was powerless. It was the strangest feeling, being detached from my body but still somehow aware of everything that was happening around me. And then, without any warning, the world around me began to change. I could feel a pull, a gentle tug, as though something was guiding me upward. It wasn't frightening. It was comforting, as if I was being led to somewhere safe. I felt weightless, free from the heaviness of the world I had known. The darkness that surrounded me began to shift, and a soft light started to glow, surrounding me on all sides. It wasn't bright like the sun, but more like the soft, warm light that comes through stained glass windows. It was calming and peaceful, and I felt an overwhelming sense of serenity. I had no idea what was happening, but I wasn't scared. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. This strange journey I was on, I had no words for it. All I knew was that, in that moment, I wasn't just floating in space. I was being pulled into something much bigger than myself. Something I couldn't yet understand, but something that deep down felt incredibly significant. And I had no idea that this was only the beginning of what would change my life forever. The moment everything went dark, I felt something I could never have anticipated. It wasn't fear or panic, just a strange, profound sense of detachment. It was as if I was no longer bound to my body, but rather floating above it, watching from a distance. I was aware of everything happening below, but I wasn't a part of it anymore. The pain in my chest, the tightness that had taken over my body was completely gone. It was replaced by a strange weightlessness, a sense of peace that I had never known. It was like floating in a swimming pool, but without the water. The sensation was both surreal and calming. I felt as if I was gently suspended in the air, drifting effortlessly. There was no struggle, no discomfort, just the absence of the pressure I had felt moments before. I could still see everything as if I were watching from above, but I was no longer in my physical form. My body lay on the dirt trail below me, lifeless, and I felt a twinge of confusion and sorrow for it. But I didn't feel connected to it anymore. I wasn't part of the world that was bound to it. I looked down and saw Maddie. She was kneeling beside my body, desperately shaking me, her face contorted with panic. I could see her lips moving, but I couldn't hear her voice. She was crying, trying to get through to me, but it was as if I was 1,000 miles away, unable to respond. I wanted to tell her I was okay, that I was somehow not gone, but the words didn't come. I felt helpless in that moment, as though I had no power over what was happening to me. But I didn't feel scared. There was a deep, comforting stillness around me, as if I was being held in a place of safety. Then it happened. A gentle pull, a sensation like someone lifting me by the hand, began to tug me upward. It wasn't a forceful motion, but a subtle guidance, as though something was drawing me to another place. The air around me seemed to shimmer, and I felt lighter, more free than I had ever felt in my life. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive feeling of the world I had known. It was the opposite, a sensation of release, of freedom from everything that once weighed me down. As I rose higher, the world around me started to change. The darkness that had enveloped me began to dissolve, replaced by a soft, warm glow. It wasn't a harsh, blinding light like the sun, but a gentle, diffused radiance, as if the light was filtered through stained glass windows. The colors were soothing, peaceful, and the light itself seemed to pulse with a quiet rhythm, as if it was alive. I wasn't sure where it was coming from or what it was, but I didn't need to understand. I could feel that it was not only safe but comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket of warmth. It was then that I realized the pull I felt wasn't just a physical sensation. It wasn't only my body being lifted, it was my soul, my very essence, being drawn toward something much greater than myself. The more I rose, the more I felt at ease, as though I was going exactly where I was supposed to be. It wasn't frightening. There was no fear or uncertainty in me. It was like the feeling you get when someone extends their hand to help you out of a pool. You don't have to do anything, you're just being helped. It was a relief, a quiet assurance that everything would be okay. As I drifted higher, I realized that I wasn't just floating aimlessly. There was purpose to this sensation. I was being guided toward something, to a place I couldn't yet see. It was all so surreal, but at the same time, everything about it felt so right. There was no rush, no urgency, just the peaceful motion, the soft glow surrounding me. And in that moment, I understood, even if I couldn't articulate it. I wasn't alone. I was being guided, and I was safe. The further I rose, the more I felt the weight of the world falling away from me. The troubles, the worries, the anxieties of my everyday life. Everything that had once seemed so important faded into the distance. It wasn't that I didn't care about those things anymore. It was just that in this moment, they didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the sense of peace, the certainty that I was where I was meant to be. I kept rising, my body weightless, the soft light surrounding me growing more intense. The deeper I moved into this space, the more I felt like I was entering another realm, a place far beyond anything I had ever known. The world I had left behind, the mountains, the trail, Maddie, seemed like it had vanished, replaced by something completely different. The air was lighter here, if air was even the right word for it. It wasn't like anything physical I had ever encountered. There was a sense of infinity, a boundless expanse that felt both vast and intimate at the same time. Then, as if I had crossed some threshold, I found myself in a place of pure radiance. It wasn't blinding or overwhelming, but it was undeniably beautiful, an all-encompassing light that didn't come from any source I could identify. It surrounded me in a way that was comforting, not harsh. The warmth and the glow felt like they were part of me, as if I was made to exist in this place, in this moment. It was more than light. It was life itself, filling every inch of this space I had entered. I felt no fear, no confusion. I simply existed, and that was enough. And then, I saw him. At first, he was just a figure in the distance, glowing brighter than anything I had ever seen. He was tall, and his presence was immense, though not overpowering. He didn't look like the images I had seen in books or Sunday school illustrations. He was real, in a way that transcended everything I had known. His form radiated light, but it wasn't just the physical light that I saw. It was his essence, his being, which filled the space around me. There was a calmness to him, an authority that didn't demand but simply existed, allowing me to feel both awe and peace at the same time. His eyes were the first thing I noticed. They weren't like human eyes. They held everything in them. The entire universe, it seemed. There was an understanding in them, a knowing that went far beyond anything I could comprehend. In his gaze, I felt the weight of all my life's moments. Every joy, every sorrow, every regret, every hope. All of it was laid bare. But the most overwhelming part was the love I felt in his eyes. It wasn't just love for me, but love for everything, every person, every living thing, every moment that had ever been or ever would be. His love was infinite, pure, and enveloping, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, understood, and loved, without condition. When he spoke, his voice wasn't like thunder or something grand. It was gentle, almost soft, but it carried such weight that it seemed to resonate deep within my soul. His words were not heard with my ears, but with my heart. I knew without question that he wasn't just speaking to me with his voice. He was speaking directly into the core of my being. "Brooke," he said. Just hearing my name from his lips was enough to bring tears to my eyes. I didn't cry out of sadness. These were tears of release, of recognition, of understanding that everything I had ever felt, every struggle, every pain, every doubt, was nothing in the face of this overwhelming love. Hearing my name from him felt like the world had finally made sense. It was as if he was telling me, without saying it outright, that I had nothing to fear, that everything would be okay. In that moment, I realized that I was safe. All the burdens I had carried, unspoken fears, unresolved grief, the weight of my own insecurities, dissolved. They were no longer mine to carry. I wasn't just floating in this space. I was in the arms of something so much greater, so much more loving than anything I'd ever known. The idea of fear or worry seemed absurd here. There was no place for it in this world of perfect love and peace. And for the first time, I felt what it truly meant to be held, not by arms or hands, but by the very essence of love itself. In that moment, there was no past or future, only the present, and it was filled with such profound peace that I couldn't help but let the tears fall. I cried, not because I was sad, but because I had been given something that I had never known I needed. A sense of belonging, a sense of home that didn't rely on anything physical or fleeting. It was a home that came from love, from understanding, from the purest form of connection. The more I stood there, or perhaps it was more that I existed there, the more I felt the weight of everything fall away. Every question I had ever had about my purpose, about my life, about what mattered, seemed to vanish in his presence. I didn't need answers. I didn't need to understand everything. I only needed to feel this, to be here, to know that I was loved in a way that transcended everything I had ever known. And in that moment, I understood. I was exactly where I was meant to be. As I stood there, bathed in the radiant light of his presence, I felt a quiet shift in the air, as though something profound was about to happen. Jesus gently placed his hand on my shoulder, and I immediately knew he was about to show me something that would change everything. My mind felt sharp and open, ready to receive what he wanted to reveal. I could sense that this was not just for me, but for the world, something that I would need to share with others when the time came. He began to speak, not with words, but with the depth of understanding that connected us in a way I couldn't describe. His voice filled my being, and I knew, without question, that he was about to show me a vision of the future of a world that, in many ways, was still blind to the truth of what was coming. He showed me 3 events, 3 moments that would unfold before 2030, and with each one, I could feel the weight of what was at stake. The first vision was horrifying. I found myself standing above the world, looking down at the cities I knew, the places I had once seen on maps and in pictures. Oceans began to rise, slowly but steadily. At first, it seemed almost peaceful, as though the water was simply a part of nature's rhythm. But soon, I saw it was not just the oceans rising. It was the water flooding the streets, swallowing buildings, and overtaking everything in its path. I watched in disbelief as the cities I recognized, New York, Miami, Tokyo, were consumed by the rising tides. The streets, once bustling with life, were now rivers of water, carrying debris and chaos. People panicked, running in every direction, their fear palpable. It was as if the world itself was being torn apart. But amidst this chaos, something beautiful began to emerge. In the heart of the panic, I saw people helping one another, lifting strangers out of the water, opening their homes to those who had nowhere to go. The love and compassion I witnessed in that moment were so profound that it made me feel that, even in the face of disaster, humanity's greatest strength would be revealed. Despite the fear and the devastation, people came together. They set aside their differences, their fears, and united in ways I had never seen before. It was a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, light could shine through. The second event unfolded before me like a shadow creeping across the land. I saw cities, once full of energy and life, fall into darkness. Electricity shut off, and everything became still. There were no lights, no buzzing of electronics, no hum of modern technology. The world became quiet. People stood in their homes, confused, unsure of what to do without their phones, their computers, their TVs. For a moment, there was panic, and a sense of helplessness filled the air. But then, something incredible happened. Slowly, people began to emerge from their homes. They stepped outside, drawn to each other by a force they couldn't explain. They didn't need their devices anymore. They needed each other. They began to talk, to reconnect in ways that had become foreign to them in the age of screens. Children played outside, their laughter ringing through the streets. Neighbors, once strangers, now became friends. People shared stories, food, and moments of genuine connection. It was as if, in the absence of technology, they rediscovered what it meant to be human. It was a return to simpler times, to the basic need for companionship, and the realization that connection didn't rely on a signal or a device. But then came the third vision. This one was more difficult to bear. I saw a new illness spreading across the globe, moving faster than anything the world had faced before. It was more contagious, more terrifying, and it spread through fear as much as through the air. People became afraid of one another. They stayed apart, not just because of the physical danger, but because of the fear that this disease instilled in them. But the real sickness, as I understood it, was not the disease itself. It was the fear. Fear would divide people, turn them against one another, and isolate them in ways we couldn't imagine. Yet in the midst of this fear, I saw something incredible. Despite the terror, people still found a way to come together. They didn't let fear drive them to despair. Instead, they turned to love. Doctors, nurses, and ordinary people worked tirelessly, caring for those who were sick, supporting one another in ways that transcended physical distance. Communities formed bonds that couldn't be broken by illness or isolation. And most profoundly, I saw people praying. Not in churches, but in their homes, in hospitals, in parks, everywhere. A wave of prayer spread across the world, reaching far beyond the walls of any building. It was a call for hope, a call for unity, a call for something greater than fear. I knew, even in that moment, that these events were not the end of the world. They were consequences of the choices humanity had made, the choices to turn away from care for the planet, for each other, and for the things that truly mattered. But even so, I also understood that these events would not be the final word. In the midst of disaster, in the face of fear and destruction, love and faith would emerge as the greatest forces of all. And those who chose to turn toward each other, who chose to live with compassion and hope, would find the strength to overcome even the darkest of times. As I stood there in the brilliant light, Jesus extended his hand, and I felt a quiet pull toward something I couldn't yet fully understand. He motioned around us, and I saw something extraordinary. In the vastness of the glowing space, I noticed golden threads stretching in all directions, connecting everything: people, places, moments. Each thread shimmered, alive with light, as if they were pathways carrying energy and life across the world. They were invisible to the naked eye, but I could sense them, feel their pulse, stretching across the globe. I watched as these golden threads stretched far beyond what I could see, weaving a tapestry of connection that bound us all together. Then, with a gentle touch, Jesus reached out and laid his hand on one of the threads. The moment his fingers touched it, the light around us intensified, spreading outward, illuminating more threads in the network. It was as if the light was alive, and the more threads it touched, the more it grew, spiraling outward into infinity. I watched in awe as the golden light stretched across the world, touching countless lives in its path. I was reminded of a time not long ago when I had prayed for my friend Zoe. She had been struggling with depression, feeling lost in a world that seemed too heavy for her to bear. I had prayed for her strength, for her heart to find peace. In that moment, I saw the threads of our prayers stretching out from me, reaching Zoe, even though I couldn't see the impact of my words. I couldn't see how my prayers were touching her life. But in that moment, I understood. Every prayer, every sincere wish for someone else, created ripples. Those ripples reached beyond what we could see, touching hearts and lives in ways we could never fully comprehend. Our prayers didn't just disappear into the air. They connected us, bound us together in a way that was both intimate and universal. The light from the threads wasn't just about illumination. It was about connection, about sharing in each other's burdens, about lifting one another up. Jesus spoke softly, his voice full of understanding. He told me that our prayers were far more powerful than we realized. They weren't just words we spoke. They were waves, ripples that carried with them not just our hopes, but also our love, our intentions, and our compassion. Even when we couldn't see the results, even when we didn't know how our prayers had touched others, they mattered. They created change in ways we would never fully understand. The connections we forged through prayer were real, tangible in the spirit world, and they helped hold everything together when it seemed like everything was falling apart. He went on to explain that in the times to come, prayer would become not just important, but absolutely essential. The world would face challenges unlike anything we had seen before. And in those moments, it would be prayer that would hold us steady. It would be prayer that would help us find the strength to carry on, even when it felt like there was nothing left. People would need to pray, not just for themselves, but for each other. The power of prayer would be the lifeline that connected us in times of separation and fear. We wouldn't be able to rely on the world's comforts, on technology, on the things that had once made us feel secure. But prayer, true, heartfelt prayer, would be the foundation that we could stand on when everything else crumbled. He told me that prayer wasn't just a way to ask for help. It was a way to strengthen one another, to share in each other's pain and joy, to lift each other up. In those moments of darkness, when the world seemed too overwhelming, it would be prayer that would bring us back to the light. It was the way we could remind each other that we weren't alone, that we were all part of something bigger. Our prayers, he said, would be a way of showing love, not just to those we knew, but to the entire world. Every prayer, every moment of connection would strengthen the bond that tied us all together. I could feel the truth of his words settle deep in my soul. I had never fully understood the power of prayer before, but now I saw it as the lifeblood of our connection to each other and to God. It wasn't just about asking for help in times of trouble. It was about creating a space for love to flow, for hope to spread, for healing to take place. And in the future, it would be this power of prayer that would help us survive the trials to come. We wouldn't just pray for ourselves, but for the world, for everyone. In this dark world, prayer would be the light. As the golden threads continued to shimmer and pulse around us, I understood that prayer was more than just an act. It was a movement, a force that would help us weather the storms ahead. And in those moments of connection, of shared hope and love, we would find the strength to overcome whatever came our way. I don't know how long I was in that place of light, suspended between worlds. Time didn't seem to matter there. I could feel the pull of reality, though, gently tugging me back. I wasn't ready to leave, but I knew I had to. There was a purpose waiting for me, one I hadn't yet fully understood. The transition back was disorienting. One moment, I was surrounded by peace and love. The next, I was back in my body. I felt it all at once. The sharpness of my breath, the aching pressure in my chest, the coolness of the ground beneath me. It was as if my soul had been pulled through the fabric of existence and forced back into my physical form. The sounds of the world around me, voices, sirens, the urgency of the moment, began to filter into my consciousness. I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me again, but it felt different now. It felt foreign, like I no longer truly belonged to it. I could hear the frantic voices of the paramedics as they worked on me, trying to revive me, trying to bring me back to life. There was a strange urgency in their actions, a panic that I didn't understand at first. But then, it became clear. I was no longer part of that peaceful, glowing place. I was here, in my body, and they were fighting to bring me back. I could hear them shouting numbers, instructions, but it all seemed distant, like a muffled background noise. It wasn't until I heard a voice say, "We've got a pulse," that I realized I was back. My heart was beating again, my body was alive, and the world was pulling me back into it. The next few days passed in a blur. The hospital became my new reality, a sterile, bright place that felt both comforting and suffocating at the same time. I was physically exhausted, but mentally, I was wide awake. The experience I had gone through, the light, the love, the visions, everything was still vivid in my mind. I couldn't forget it, and I didn't want to. I needed to make sense of it, to understand what it all meant. And most importantly, I needed to share it with someone. When my mom came to visit me at the hospital, she wasn't surprised by what I told her. It wasn't that she didn't care, but she seemed to understand. She had always been the strong, practical one, but there was a softness in her eyes when she listened. My dad, on the other hand, was different. He had always been skeptical, grounded in logic, and when I told him about my experience, he didn't respond the way I expected. Instead of dismissing it outright, he sat in silence for a long time, looking at me as if trying to understand. Then, he told me about his own experience, one he had kept secret for years. He had once been in a near-fatal car accident, and during that time, he had felt something similar, something he couldn't explain. It wasn't the same as mine, but it was enough to make him pause, enough to make him question the things he had always believed. That moment with my dad was profound because it made me realize I wasn't alone in what I had experienced. Maybe these things weren't as rare as I had once thought. Returning home was strange. The world seemed different, almost as if it had shifted while I had been away. The colors were brighter, the sounds sharper, and I noticed things I'd never noticed before. The tired look in a stranger's eyes, the subtle changes in the way people interacted with each other. It was as though I was seeing the world with new eyes, eyes that had been opened to something beyond the surface. I could feel the weight of every moment, every interaction, and I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't ignore the beauty in the small things, the way a simple smile could light up someone's day, or how a few words of kindness could change a life. I began to feel a pull to do something with what I had experienced. I couldn't keep this knowledge, this understanding of love and connection, to myself. It wasn't enough just to feel it. I had to share it. So I started a small group. It was just a few people at first, people who were close to me. Maddie, of course, who had been with me that day, my mom, a neighbor from down the street who had recently lost her husband. We gathered in my basement, and at first, we just talked. We prayed together, shared our fears, our hopes, our questions about life, death, and everything in between. It wasn't a church group, and it wasn't about religion. It was about connection. It was about preparing our hearts for whatever was coming, not just for the disasters and the struggles we might face, but for the spiritual growth we needed to experience. We talked about how to face these challenges with love, with faith, and with community. The group grew, and so did our conversations. We didn't just talk about surviving, we talked about thriving, about finding meaning in the midst of hardship. We weren't just preparing for external disasters. We were preparing ourselves internally, spiritually, to face whatever the world threw at us. We learned to rely on each other, to pray for each other, to support each other through the darkest moments. And in doing so, we created a bond that felt unbreakable. As I reflected on my experience, I realized that the message was clear. We are all connected, not just through our prayers, but through our love and our willingness to show up for one another. The struggles we would face in the future wouldn't be easy, but they would bring us together if we let them. And it was this love, this faith, that would carry us through. It was the understanding that we are not alone, that no matter how hard life gets, there is always a light, always a reason to hope. And it was our purpose to share that light, to help others see it when they couldn't.